Something important is taking shape in Detroit right now, and if you've been paying close attention to how this roster is being built, you can already see that this isn't about panic or drastic changes after missing the playoffs with a 9-8 record last season. This is about calculated adjustments, reinforcing a foundation that the front office truly believes is still very close to competing at a high level again. And that belief starts at the top with general manager Brad Holmes, who made it very clear that this team is not undergoing a full rebuild or any kind of deep overhaul. In his own words, he emphasized that the Lions are not that far off, pointing to a roster filled with young, ascending talent, a quarterback he wishes in, and the right coaching staff in place. That's a strong statement when you consider the expectations coming off back-to-back NFC North titles in 2023 and 2024, followed by a season where injuries played a major role in derailing momentum. That context matters because it explains why the focus this offseason has been on depth and versatility rather than headline-grabbing moves. The Lions didn't collapse last year because they lacked talent. They struggled because they didn't have enough reliable depth when injuries hit. And that's exactly what Holmes is addressing with this current wave of additions. Take the offensive line, for example. Bringing in Cade Mays fills a critical need right in the middle. This is a player who has started consistently over the last couple of seasons, and more importantly, has not allowed a single sack during that span. His pressure rate last season was among the best at his position, which tells you this isn't just a depth signing. It's a move that stabilizes a key part of the offense. Then you look at Larry Borom, and this is where versatility becomes a theme. He's not just a tackle. He's someone who has experience across multiple positions on the line. That kind of flexibility is exactly what you need over a long NFL season when injuries inevitably force adjustments. Now shift to the backfield, and the addition of Isaiah Pacheco brings a completely different edge to the offense. This is a physical, downhill runner who has already proven he can produce at a high level, including multiple seasons with strong yardage totals and even contributing in the passing game. He's also coming in with championship experience, which adds another layer of value to a locker room that's trying to take the next step. Defensively, the Lions clearly targeted players who can do more than just fill one role. Christian Izien is a perfect example of that. He's been used all over the field, safety, slot corner, and special teams, which gives the coaching staff flexibility in how they deploy him. Alongside him, Roger McCreary brings experience both on the outside and in the nickel, and with Detroit looking to solidify that nickel corner role, this becomes a very intriguing competition heading into 2026. And then there's the pass rush, where adding players like DJ Wonnum and Peyton Turner shows a clear strategy. Wonnum has already demonstrated he can produce sacks in multiple seasons, while Turner represents more of a high upside play, a former first-round pick whose career has been limited by injuries, but still carries the physical tools that made him such a coveted prospect. These are the kinds of moves that don't guarantee success individually, but increase the overall ceiling of the unit when combined. Offensively, the tight end room also gets a boost with Tyler Conklin, giving the team another reliable veteran option alongside Sam Laporta and Brock Wright. Having three capable tight ends opens up possibilities in both the passing game and blocking schemes, which can make the offense even more unpredictable. And one move that might fly under the radar but could be more important than it seems is the reported return of Teddy Bridgewater. Having a veteran backup quarterback who already knows the system and has extensive experience provides stability behind Jared Goff, something that becomes crucial over a long season. Even the re-signings tell a story. Bringing back players like Rock Ya-Sin and Malcolm Rodriguez shows that this front office values continuity and chemistry just as much as new talent. These are players who already understand the culture and expectations in Detroit, and that matters when you're trying to bounce back quickly. So when you step back and look at the bigger picture, this doesn't feel like a team trying to reinvent itself. This feels like a team fine-tuning the details, addressing weaknesses, and preparing for another run, this time with more depth, more flexibility, and more insurance against the kind of setbacks that hurt them last season. But here's the real question as all of this comes together. Are these calculated moves enough to push the Lions back into the playoffs and truly contend again, or does this roster still need one more major piece to get over the top? What do you think about the direction Detroit is taking right now? And this is where things get even more interesting, because when you connect all these moves together, you start to see a very intentional blueprint forming, not just for this season, but for how the Lions want to sustain success moving forward. Look at the balance they're building across the roster. On one side, you have proven veterans being added in key spots, players like Tyler Conklin, DJ Wonnum, and even Teddy Bridgewater, guys who who understand the league, who've played meaningful snaps, and who can stabilize units when things get tough. On the other side, you still have that young core Brad Holmes keeps talking about. Players who are either entering their prime or still ascending. The goal here isn't to replace that core, it's to protect it. Because last season showed exactly what can happen when that protection isn't strong enough. Injuries didn't just hurt Detroit, they exposed how thin certain positions were when starters went down. And instead of reacting emotionally to that, the front office is responding strategically. They're adding players who can step in without forcing the entire system to change. Take the secondary again for a moment. Christian Izien and Roger McCreary aren't just depth pieces, they're insurance policies with real starting experience. Between them, there are over 50 starts in the NFL, and more importantly, both can line up in multiple roles. That means if one piece goes down, you're not scrambling to rebuild the structure of your defense, you're simply adjusting within it. That's a huge difference from what we saw at times last season. The same logic applies to the defensive front. Adding DJ, Onum gives you a player who has already proven he can generate pressure consistently in certain years, while Peyton Turner represents that high-risk, high-reward type of move. If Turner stays healthy, you're potentially unlocking a level of production that this defense has been missing off the edge. And if he doesn't, you've still built enough depth around him to avoid being overly dependent on one player. Now think about the offensive identity. Bringing in Isaiah Pacheco changes the tone of the run game. This is a back who runs with intensity, who can wear down defenses, and who has already shown he can perform in big moments. Pair that with an offensive line that's being reinforced in the middle with Cade Mays and supported by a versatile piece like Larry Borom, and you're starting to see a unit that could be more resilient and more physical than it was a year ago. And that matters because everything still runs through Jared Goff. The confidence Brad Holmes expressed in his quarterback wasn't casual. It reflects a belief that with the right support, this offense can still be one of the most efficient units in the league. Protect him better, give him a consistent run game, and surround him with reliable options like Sam Laporta, Brock Wright, and now Tyler Conklin, and you're maximizing what this system is designed to do. But here's where the conversation shifts from what we know to what could still happen. Because Holmes made it clear, this isn't the final version of the roster. There's still another wave of free agency to navigate, and more importantly, the NFL draft is right around the corner. And if this front office truly believes they are very close, then that next addition, whether it's a rookie or another strategic signing, could end up being the piece that changes everything. Maybe it's another impact defender. Maybe it's more explosiveness on offense. Or maybe it's simply more competition across the board to raise the overall level of the team. Whatever it is, the foundation being built right now gives them the flexibility to go in multiple directions without desperation. And that's the biggest difference compared to teams that miss the playoffs and immediately hit reset. Detroit isn't resetting. They're refining. They're betting on continuity, on internal growth, and on smarter depth to carry them further than they went last year. So now it comes down to execution. On paper, this roster looks deeper. It looks more versatile. It looks better prepared for the long grind of an NFL season. But as we've seen before, potential doesn't win games. Performance does. If these additions hit, if the young core takes another step, and if injuries don't derail the momentum again, then this team absolutely has a path back to the playoffs, and maybe even beyond that. Now it's on the players and coaches to turn this carefully built plan into results on the field. And the truth is, what happens next could define not just the 2026 season, but the entire trajectory of this current Lions era. Because when a front office takes this kind of approach, measured, disciplined, and focused on depth, it puts a lot of pressure on development. These moves only truly pay off if the players already in the building elevate their level of play. That's the hidden layer in everything Detroit is doing right now. They're not just counting on the new additions, they're counting on internal growth. That means the expectation is clear. The young core that Brad Holmes believes in so strongly has to take another step forward. The players who showed flashes now have to become consistent. The ones who were already producing need to become difference makers in bigger moments. That's how a team goes from close to legitimately dangerous. And there's also a psychological edge to all of this. When a front office chooses not to overhaul the roster after missing the playoffs, it sends a message to the locker room: we believe in you. That kind of trust can either fuel a team or expose it, because now there are no excuses. The structure is there, the depth is improved, and the system is intact. It's about proving that last season was the exception, not the beginning of a decline. At the same time, don't overlook how important competition is going to be in training camp. A lot of these additions aren't guaranteed starters. starters. They're players coming in to compete, and that raises the overall standard across the roster. Positions like the secondary, the edge rotation, and even parts of the offensive line are going to be battles, and those battles are what sharpen a team before the season even begins. So when you look at the bigger picture now, this isn't just a roster being filled out, it's a roster being challenged. Every position group has more pressure, more options, and more accountability than it did a year ago, and if that translates the way the Lions expect it to, then this team won't just be deeper, they'll be tougher, more adaptable, and more prepared for the kind of adversity that knocked them off track last season. But it all comes back to that same idea we've been circling around this entire time. Being close is not enough in the NFL. You either take that next step or you fall behind. So as this offseason continues and the final pieces come into place, one thing becomes very clear. Detroit has set the stage. Now they have to deliver. And as this continues to unfold, there's one more layer that can't be ignored. The margin for error is getting smaller. When a team positions itself the way Detroit is doing right now, living in that space between very close and not quite there, every decision carries more weight. Every snap, every rotation, every adjustment during the season becomes magnified, because this is no longer a team building from the ground up. This is a team trying to break through, and that's where coaching becomes just as critical as roster construction. The Lions already believe they have the right leadership in place, and Brad Holmes made that clear. But now the challenge shifts to maximizing all these pieces. When you bring in versatile players like Christian Ezien and Roger McCreary, it's not just about having them, it's about using them correctly, putting them in positions where their flexibility becomes an advantage, not confusion. The same goes for players like Larry Borom along the offensive line, or even how DJ Wanham and Peyton Turner are rotated along the edge. Depth only matters if it's used effectively. And then there's situational football, something that often separates playoff teams from the rest. Late game execution, red zone efficiency, third down defense. These are the areas where a good team becomes a great one. And when you look back at a 9-8 season where the playoffs slipped away, it's almost always those small moments that made the difference. That's why these additions, while they may not seem flashy, are designed to raise the floor of the entire team, to make sure that when those critical moments arrive, Detroit has more reliable options on the field. Another factor that's quietly building in the background is identity. What exactly is this Lions team going to be in 2026? Because now they have the pieces to shape that identity in multiple ways. With a physical runner like Isaiah Pacheco, they can lean more into a tough, ground-focused attack when needed. With multiple tight ends like Tyler Conklin joining Sam Laporta and Brock Wright, they can create mismatches and control the middle of the field. Defensively, with added versatility in the secondary and more bodies on the edge, they can disguise looks and adapt week to week depending on the opponent. That flexibility is powerful, but it also requires clarity. The best teams in the league aren't just versatile, they're defined. They know exactly who they are when it matters most. So one of the biggest questions heading into the season isn't just about